Picture a hotel in New York, a small group of finance ministers walking for a private meeting. By the time they walk out, the dollar has lost half its value against two of the world's biggest currencies. That's not a hypothetical, that actually happened in 1985. And right now, in 2026, there's a real plan to do it again. It already has a name, the Mar-a-Lago Accord. To understand what Trump is trying to do, you first have to understand why the dollar is so powerful and why that power has become a double-edged sword. So since the end of World War II, the US dollar has been the world reserve currency. When countries trade oil, commodities or anything internationally, they price it in dollars. When central banks need a safe asset, they buy US Treasuries. This gives America an exorbitant privilege. The US can borrow cheaply. It can run deficits that would bankrupt any other country. And the world essentially has to hold dollar, whether it wants to or not. Sound great, right? But here's the hidden cost. All that foreign demand keeps the dollar permanently strong, sometimes artificially strong, and the strong dollar makes American exports expensive. It makes American factories uncompetitive. It hollows out manufacturing and ships blue collar jobs overseas. That is the core diagnosis of the Mar-a-Lago Accord. The reserve currency status that Wall Street loves has been quietly killing Main Street for decades. The intellectual architect of this plan is a man most people had never heard of before 2025, Stephen Miran. In November 2024, before Trump even won the election, Miran wrote a lengthy policy paper. He was working at Hudson Bay Capital at the time. The paper was called A User's Guide to Restructuring the Global Trading System. In it, he laid out a blueprint for a new monetary order. His central argument is that the dollar is overvalued. This happens because of inelastic foreign demand for US treasuries. That overvaluation is the root cause of America's trade deficit. It causes the destruction of its manufacturing base. And the solution is a coordinated multilateral agreement to weaken the dollar. It is very similar to the Plaza Accord of 1985. Trump read the paper. He appointed Miran as chair of his Council of Economic Advisors and eventually he placed him on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. To understand the playbook, you have to know your history. In 1985, the dollar was at its most overvalued level in decades. It was very similar to today. US manufacturers were being destroyed by cheap Japanese and German imports. Sound familiar? And the Reagan administration convened the finance minister of the US, Japan, West Germany, France, and the UK. They met at the Plaza Hotel in New York. Together, they signed an agreement to weaken the dollar through coordinated intervention. And the result, the dollar fell roughly 50% against the yen and the Deutschmark over the next 2 years. US exports surged, manufacturing recovered, but here's the key ingredient. The Federal Reserve cooperated. Fed Chair Paul Volcker cut interest rates from roughly 12% down to 6%. This created the monetary condition for the dollar to fall. Without the Fed on board, the Plaza Accord would have been just words on paper. So, how do you actually execute a modern dollar reset? The Miran framework on three levers. Lever number one, tariff as leverage. Tariffs are not just about raising revenue or protecting industries. In the Miran framework, they are a negotiating tool. Countries that want tariff relief have to offer something in return. And that something is letting their currencies appreciate against the dollar. A stronger yuan or yen automatically makes a weaker dollar. You export the adjustment, and lever number two is monetary policy alignment. A weaker dollar requires lower US interest rates. You cannot have the Fed raising rates while the White House tries to push the currency lower. They cancel each other out, with Miran now inside the Fed and Powell's term ending. The administration is positioning for aligned monetary policy, lower rates, looser condition, weaker dollar. Lever number 3, gold revaluation. This is the most unconventional piece. The US government officially carries its gold reserve on the books at $42 per ounce. That is a relic from the Bretton Woods era. The market price of gold is now $4,000. There is a serious non-fringe proposal to revalue those gold holdings to marketplace. This would generate a notional gain of trillions of dollars on the Fed's balance sheet. That money could be used to buy back treasury debt. It could fund new spending, or it could stabilize the system during a transition to a weaker dollar regime. Gold has already surged over 100% in the past year. Central banks are buying it at a pace not seen in a half a century. Now let us steelman the critics, because there are serious ones. Harvard economist Jeffrey Frankel argues this plan is based on a deeply flawed understanding. He questions the relationship between dollar strength and deindustrialization. His point is that you cannot devalue the dollar without also raising US borrowing cost, and higher borrowing cost mean higher interest payments on America's $39 trillion debt. The fiscal math gets worse, not better. The Atlantic Council raised another problem. The Plaza Accord worked because the US was negotiating with allies, countries that depended on American security guarantees. Japan, West Germany, France, they had incentives to cooperate. Today, the US biggest trade deficit is with China. China does not rely on the US military. Threatening tariffs on a country that can retaliate in kind is a very different negotiating position, especially since China holds over $600 billion in US Treasuries, reduced from its peak $1.3 trillion. And then there is the reserve currency risk. If foreign governments look at America's dollar policy and conclude the US is deliberately inflating away their savings, they will stop holding treasuries. That is not a theoretical risk. Central banks have already bought more gold than US treasuries for the first time in 50 years. The diversification away from the dollar is already happening. This policy could accelerate it dramatically. So what this means for our money? Let us bring this home. What does a deliberate dollar devaluation mean for an ordinary person? In the short term, your bank account balance stays the same number, but the purchasing power of these dollars quietly shrink. Imported goods like electronics, clothing, cars, and food become more expensive. Travel abroad costs more. Your dollar buys fewer euros, yen, and pounds. For investors, the calculus shifts. A weaker dollar is historically good for gold, commodities, and international equities. Your foreign stock holding go up in dollar terms. It can also benefit US exporters and domestic manufacturers. But it is generally bad for bonds, cash, savings, and anything denominated in dollar. For the broader economy, the effect takes years to play out. If manufacturing generally comes back, if trade deficits shrink, if blue-collar employment rises, then the architect of this plan will look like geniuses. If instead we get sustained inflation, a collapse in treasury demand and a dollar crisis, they will look like reckless gamblers who blew up the global financial order. And the honest answer is that nobody knows which way it goes. This is genuinely unprecedented territory. And here's what I know for sure. The dollar has already fallen over 10% in the past year. That is not noise. That is the largest early year decline since 1973, the year after Nixon's gold shock. Gold is at record high. The people running US economic policy have written explicitly about restructuring the global monetary order. The reset is not a conspiracy theory, it is a stated policy goal. It is being executed in real time. Whether it ends like 1985, a controlled devaluation that revives American industry, or like 1971, a chaotic break that reshapes the world for decades. We are living through it right now, and if history is any guide, most people won't understand what happened until it is already over. So do not be one of those people. Subscribe, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know in the comments. Is this the smartest economic restructuring in a generation, or the biggest financial gamble in modern history?